Hello everyone, I'm delighted to host episode 12 of the Money Carer podcast, and today we have Rich Wagner on the podcast. Rich is the founder and CEO of Zempler Bank, a very busy man, and I thank you for your time, Rich, for joining us today. A lot of people will know you as the CEO, founder of Cashplus Bank, and we'll go into the name change and all the exciting things that are going on. But I wonder whether you could, fill in the gaps for our audience as to pre-Cashplus. What's your sort of background and your professional career and what have you, and build a story as to when you came to the UK and the whole idea of Cashplus.
No, absolutely. Well, my storied career started, nearly 40 years ago, and it started as a customer service advisor at Bank of America. So I've been in banking and payments when I was 20 years old, and 40 years later, I'm still absolutely passionate and enjoying what I do. And, I came over to the UK about 20 years ago. We founded a small company before Cashplus to help the underserved credit card market in the UK, very similar to the Capital One model. And it was a digital model at the time, direct mail, along with digital innovation even before its time. But it was really there to serve the underserved. And thus, as we move that forward, certainly more digital enablements came along in the industry through technology advances. And certainly the need for banking services to an unserved population. When I was here in the UK 20 years ago, you had nearly 6 to 7 million customers that were truly unbanked. It wasn't even underserved by banks. They were unbanked. Check cashers, pawnbrokers were prolific in this country, serving as almost the alternative to banks because these immigrants were unable, and unbanked individuals were solely relying on a cash-based economy. And we really, hopefully, helped change the economy by actually creating Cashplus and allowing individuals to move their cash, which is not a very secure way to transact, into a digital medium called Cashplus in 2005, and we've evolved that over time, which we'll certainly talk about. But my impetus for Cashplus was my own personal story around coming to the UK as an immigrant. And when people think about immigrants, there are all types of immigrants. One might not categorize me as one, but when I came here, I was one. And guess what? I could not get a bank account. And I'm a banker, and thus the challenges of getting a bank account, even though I knew what I needed to do for the bank, I knew what they needed, I still was unable and unsuccessful for over 6 months to actually get one. And that's been my passion and motivation. And ironically, 25 years later, in the UK, we still have that challenge today. And that's what makes me excited about when we founded Cashplus and now Zempler Bank, and the fact that challenge and opportunity to help these underserved customers still resonates with me today. So a 40-year whistle-top history of my background and my purpose for, loving what I do with Zempler Bank.
No, that's great, Rich, and it helps to connect the dots. But just to ask you, when, in that 6-month period when you were pulling your hair out trying to open a bank account way back when, what were you asked to do? What computer says no. What were the hurdles that you were having to try to overcome?
They're looking for a record of me. So, when you come to the UK, or to be honest, when you come to any country, you don't exist in the electronic ecosystem that determines whether you exist or not. So, of course, I came here. I didn't, I wasn't able to vote, so I wasn't on the electoral roll. I didn't have an address, and I certainly didn't have your traditional forms of, local identification, which was something that was needed. Now that's moved on, but that, getting an address is not as easy as one says. And although I was fortunate enough to be given, corporate housing, it actually was my detriment because I was given corporate housing.
But it wasn't in your name, presumably.
Yeah, I did. The tenancy agreement wasn't in my name. The electricity bill wasn't in my name. The water bill wasn't in my name. So to the bank, I literally did not exist. And when you don't exist with a bank, even though I had a 30 to 35 year track record of information, credit bureaus, credit ratings in the US, they don't share that data across the Atlantic. And so in a nutshell, I did not exist. And building up that information to allow somebody to make a decision on me was what I needed to do over that 6-month period.
It's fascinating. I think I first heard about. I think it was an article in the Times or the Telegraph, one of the papers, and about the launch of a prepaid card. And I'd never heard of it, but I remember thinking, that's a great idea. In fact, I know we've had this conversation before. I think I was one of your first customers because in a previous life, in the previous business I had, I thought, actually, I really want to look at that product because that might have a role within the organisation. And we applied and we got one. And I think we made contact way back when. But what was the incentive to, I know you've touched on it a bit, but was there a light bulb moment in terms of, you know what, I need to launch a prepaid card product in the UK? And how did you go about it? How did you get from A to B?
Yeah, well, certainly the stats around the number of truly unbanked customers that were out there really set my wheels in motion. But it was really that personal experience that I just explained that suggests, my goodness, if a banker and a bank experienced individual who's an immigrant in the UK can't get a bank account, my goodness, I wonder what the poor experiences of the 7 million people out there are having in terms of getting a bank account. And at least I had a path to understand how to get a bank account. And that's really what led me as one of the first criteria of actually setting up Cashplus. Second, I had talked to a number of experts in the US where prepaid was more mature, still in its incubation arena, nearly 20 years ago, but that, desire to really help a customer move from, although, cash was a solution for many, many years, we know that the safety, security element and the ability to transact online where Amazon, didn't necessarily even exist, you needed, an account like that. And what we also saw is so many people getting accidentally indebted in this country and could not afford to repay. The beauty of having a prepaid card, which actually, a la a debit card in some respects, but better, because the prepaid card would not let you get into an overdraft situation, would not let you get into a negative balance situation. We help control and support those customers that we served. And again, we did it, successfully for over 15 years of offering that prepaid card in a manner that actually allowed people to get banked and allowed them to understand banking services such that they could grow and develop and build a credit rating and fulfill more of their life's ambitions by actually moving up into the banking ecosystem and getting not just a prepaid card, but ultimately a debit card and then ultimately a credit card. So we're excited to be on that forefront of innovation, nearly 20 years ago.
It's helping to tackle financial inclusion. It's a catalyst to getting into a more sort of mainstream sort of banking environment. I'm always fascinated by how entrepreneurs, how founders start organizations. Yours is a personal story. Mine was a personal story. The light bulb moment. Actually, if I'm struggling with this, other people must be struggling with this. So I'm always interested when we have guests on the show to find out how did it all sort of come about. So you launched the prepaid card. You've got the background there. My understanding is that you attracted investments to do that. Is that right, Rich?
Yeah. In fact, it was so innovative in the UK and Europe. And this is one thing I would always say to entrepreneurs. I got rejected, over 100 times. And ultimately, my early angel investor, somebody that I had worked with a while, we put in, a few £100,000 just to keep it going. And he invited me to come to New York. He knew a few investors. And literally it was after 100 rejections, it did get a little wearing, but resilience is also needed for entrepreneurs. I went in and pitched in New York to Trident Capital. And in my first pitch in the US, because they kind of knew the product, they said, "Oh, gosh, you're going to be the first prepaid card in the UK. Woo, that sounds pretty good." So I secured £7.5 million of a Series A investment back in 2005 from a US-based private equity firm willing to invest in my idea and my vision to, provide a solution for that underserved and, unbanked community in the UK.
So you had the idea, and based on your own personal experience, you raised the capital, you've got the cash in the bank, there's a business plan. What was the route to market? How did you approach? Right, great, I've secured the funding, let's go. What were your thoughts around route to market?
Well, it certainly was. Where do these people bank? This market, the money service businesses have kind of evolved over time. But we had a significant in the UK, a significant number of check cashers supporting the immigrants in a cash economy and in what I would say a check economy, to be able to turn that check into cash when you didn't have a bank account.
The cash
And so,
converter type operations, that sort of thing.
yeah, you'll remember in the UK, Dollar Financial, they had well over 800 outlets, because it was a very high demand type solution. Because if you're an immigrant like me, you didn't have a bank account,
And it was
certainly
expensive. It was
yeah.
expensive to cash a check, wasn't it? I remember.
Absolutely. What you had was, contractors who were willing to basically take on immigrants to do work, and the contractors didn't have faster payments or electronic means to pay you, and they literally went to the bank, with a briefcase on Friday afternoon, loaded up their briefcase, went to the construction site, and handed out the weekly wages in cash to these people. You have to realize it's only been 20 years ago that was the main way contractors, and in the construction area, and I use that as one industry, but a good industry to share, where cash was the means to pay people. And we saw that in certainly our electronic card, the precursor to getting a debit card, which they couldn't get either, was a stepping stone for them to actually get paid in a much safer way, and allowed them to get onto the e-commerce sites, to be able to get cheaper materials, cheaper foods, cheaper merchandise through the Amazons and the eBays of the world, which they were completely excluded from without a payment device that allowed you to operate on the internet.
We've talked about sort of cash, and that was a great, analogy in terms of the construction industry and suitcases of cash and what have you, and getting people online so they can, get better deals and all the things that we enjoy every day these days. However, everything's cyclical, isn't it? And there's a whole debate around access to cash now, and the place of where cash fits into the ecosystem. What's your view on cash these days? And within the context of your story, we'll go on to moving into the banking license in a tick. But what's your view on cash within the ecosystem?
Yeah, we've seen countries. If you go into Denmark or any of the Nordic countries, and I did this probably about 10 years ago. Typical process. I get off the plane, get through immigration, go to an ATM. So I at least have whatever, 20 pounds equivalent of the local currency. And this was like 15 years ago. It was the first time ever, and this was 15 years ago. You had the Denmarks of the world, the Belgians of the world. You had a country where I took out 20 pounds of equivalent money, and I left that country with 20 pounds of equivalent money, because there was no need for that country to accept cash anywhere that a card wasn't accepted. And I think that was a really aha moment for me, to recognize that, is cash going to be dead? Well, it only works in countries where the government makes it dead, because and I fast forward to, the cost of living crisis that we have today. Certainly cash was reduced during COVID because people had to do a lot more electronic commerce. But this cost of living crisis that has occurred over the last couple of years as the interest rates have increased, UK finance has shown that cash usage has gone up, because the budgeting demands of a consumer now has increased substantially. And as much innovation that I have provided in this industry for 20 years, the Monzos have done, the Starlings have done, these digital banks that have been created, nothing is more powerful than having 40 pounds on your kitchen table on Monday, and you need to have it last until Sunday. It's a visual representation to the individual who has to budget that, ironically, as well as digital banks have gotten, and we've gotten very well at helping people budget. Boy, I tell you, the physical view of the monetary instrument on your table every day is still more powerful than the digital great solutions that the entire industry has. And we saw it. UK Finance proved that in the last 2 years, cash usage has bumped. It had a major decline, but we've had a slight increase in cash usage, solely because it is a great budgeting tool. Not very secure, but it remains a great budgeting tool that digital banks have not fully overcome and won't overcome for many years, until the government decides, you know what, it's better that we don't have cash. And that's like the Denmarks and the Finlands of the world, those countries where the government has mandated, cash is not really accepted is the only places you'll find it. UK, there's still a substantial amount of cash being used in the economy. And we're talking, only 10 years ago, did cash end up being less than 50% of the total economy 10 years ago. And so we're sitting about 30% now that people still use cash, rapidly going down. I think we need to do more because I'm a digital bank CEO, executive. I want people to use digital solutions, but we need to continue to push forward to make sure people can use these in an easy, simple way that provides them a great experience.
With cash and the example you gave about cash on the kitchen table, it's the reverse of out of sight, out of mind. It's very visible, isn't it? And from a budgeting perspective, that does count. Fascinating stuff, Rich. So obviously, I think we started to work with you guys way back when. Because of our involvement in the public sector and the work that Cashplus was doing in the public sector. Fast forward, some years, Cashplus became a bank. What was the transition to become a bank, and what was the motivation to actually become a bank?
We generally got to scale. I mean, we got to a scale big enough to manage the governance and regulatory requirements that it takes to be a bank. And I believe from a regulatory perspective, I think the UK regulators in the main, the PRA, the FCA, are doing a very good job to make sure they provide economic and financial stability to the UK. And the fact is, it does cost money to do that. And you have to get to a certain scale to make that happen. I do like the fact that, when you say you're a bank, those four letters, BANK, what does that stand for? Absolute 100% trust, safety of your money. You're backed by the financial compensation scheme. Now, we've been around for 20 years. We're not going anywhere. But if there was a economic event, your money is protected whether you're banking with Zempler or you're not banking with Zempler. That money is always safe and backed by the UK government. And I think that's something that you can't get when you're a non-bank. I do voice a concern where spending money on a prepaid card is absolutely great. Saving on a prepaid card is not the best thing that you should be doing. You really need a trusted partner, a trusted bank to make those things happen. And I'm hoping that we've kind of bridged the gap of that sustainability and trust under the brick and mortar bank, but as a digital player, while providing innovation, speed, and simplicity through a digital environment that gets the best of both worlds. But being a bank allowed us to say, hey, we have a bank account, not a prepaid card. We have overdrafts, not just simply a no-name credit product. The ability to name things in a way that customers understood, and the fact that four-letter word is incredibly powerful globally, not just in the UK. And that's really the impetus that we got to scale, that we could provide an absolutely ironclad, trusted product that not only they could believe in Zempler, but it would be backed by the UK government.
Lots of our clients, partners are solicitors, law firms, local authorities. And you're absolutely right. I'm often asked to explain the difference between a bank and e-money, license. Yeah. The way I explain it is I tend to gravitate towards the financial services compensation scheme, as you've touched on there, because people know it. They might not know exactly what it is, but they know it's protection. They know it's established and it's a thing. I often explain, well, with an e-money institution, yes, your money's protected, but in a different way, and it's parked elsewhere. Perhaps for our audience who aren't as familiar with a bank account versus an e-money account, if you could just explain precisely the difference, because that would actually help me when I explain this to our partners who ask me that question all the time. I kind of know, but
to be fair, I mean, e-money issuers have an obligation to store your money in a manner that actually it's available and accessible anytime you want it. And one of the things that we did when we were an e-money issuer is that money was ring-fenced to make sure that that money wasn't used for any working capital or anything like that. And reputable firms like Cashplus, we could prove to partners, that it was safe and secure. But it's like grading your own homework. We know of bad situations where an entity didn't do what it was supposed to do. And if an entity like an e-money issuer doesn't do what they're supposed to do, then the money is lost. If a bank doesn't do what it's supposed to do, and it does the same thing in terms of no longer is able to trade, financial compensation scheme is there to back you up. That is the big difference. There is an obligation for e-money to protect your money, But with the banks, you have the extra protection of a third party that will step in if there is a problem. So you have an insurance policy by banking with a bank. You don't have an insurance policy when you're banking with an e-money institution.
The Financial Services Compensation Scheme, how is that funded?
Well, by us being the collective banks. And so we pay a premium every year to be a participant, almost a mandatory premium. It's not like we can opt out. But yeah, every bank, based on the amount of deposits they have served, you pay an annual premium into there, and they continue to build up a provision of money so that in the event that, a bank fails, the ability to pay out on those things is available. Even with some of the bank failures that we have had in the past, those payouts have always happened, and so that safety and security of knowing that FSCS insurance policy will pay out does allow people to easily sleep at night, especially for enterprises, government agencies, local authorities, where you had the Icelandic issues and stuff where banks, weren't as stable as one would say. And so the fact is, the finance, you're not going to get fired by putting your money into a UK bank. Because the safety and security of that is paramount. And I really believe that that's an important differentiator for Zempler Bank, because although we're small and we have been going in a track record of many, many years, you still get the insurance policy with Zempler Bank, just like you get with NatWest. So it's a great protection for anybody banking with Zempler Bank.
That's a very helpful explanation. So 20 years in, next week's a big week.
Yes, we're really excited. I mean, people always tentative to tell the founding CEO of Cashplus, we think that you should change your name. Trust me, I was one of the most enthusiastic individuals around this, and I'm so grateful to the likes of our marketing area and Alex and the overall teams who put their heart and soul into figuring out what would the new name be. And being an operations type person, I certainly didn't have an appreciation of all the effort that goes into creating a quality name backed through a trademark and IP and all the work that our legal teams had to do. And, we were really happy about the name selection process and incredibly happy. Zempler was our first choice. You always have to come up with backups just in case you can't get the IP or trademark rights. But we were able to get our first Zempler. And for us, it resonates everything I wanted the bank to be 20 years ago. Simple and exemplary. That's what Zempler stands for. And to have that in the brand itself, really playing to the heritage of what Cashplus really started as, but to leverage Zempler for the future generations as a bank that is simple and exemplary in its service is something that I'm really proud of. And my goodness, when we launch, it will be one of the most exciting milestones in my 40-year career.
And I was going to ask you about, you've answered the question for me, where did the name come about? What's the component parts of the name? And you've addressed that. Another question I would have is, if I met you for the first time, didn't know who you were, Rich, and you said, oh, yeah, I'm Rich Wagner, this is me, Zempler Bank. What does Zempler Bank do? Who are they there to serve?
We're here to serve the underserved, primarily the micro businesses and firms out there that actually need a simple transactional current account. That is basically what we do. We help service, different ends of the market. To be fair, we do enterprise solutions, we do payroll solutions, but what we do is you take the guts of a current account. What does a current account do? It allows you to make transactions anywhere in the world under the MasterCard logo, and it allows you to move money, unbelievably now, in nanoseconds from point A to point B. We package that specifically as a current account. But what's great about our product is that we can decouple that so that if you only need faster payments, we can provide that solution to you. And we do that cheaper and more conveniently than any high street bank out there. In fact, I know our costs are at least 50% lower than any of the high street branches out there. So it's providing that type of service we know that we can do. But the core construct of it is we provide one of the best business current account infrastructures in the UK. And I can say that because we've been doing it, enhancing it for the last 20 years, and no digital bank can say that. no digital bank can say they've been working and enhancing their product for 20 years because, guys, we were the first.
It's interesting when you talk about breaking down a bank account product into various parts and how those component parts can be used in isolation or in combination. Certainly from our partnership in terms of our sector, which is challenging and unique in its own right, some of the innovations that we're working on together, which are making a huge difference to our partners and forthcoming partners in the sector, I think are testimony to that. Brought into the conversation, other challenger banks. What do you see the challenges to challenger banks? What's on the horizon there? If you're scanning the horizon, you've got the legacy banks, you've got the Monzos of this world, for example. Everything changes, everything is in flux. Where do you see the next sort of 2 years to 5 years? And I know you haven't got a crystal ball, but what's your view?
Oh, it's one of these pendulums. We heard the word, there's a terminology in the industry called the CMA 9, and the 9 represented the 9 banks in the entire country. That's how many banks that were in the UK 25, 30 years ago. Well, you could well imagine competition and innovation when you only have 9 megalithic banks meant that customers were disadvantaged. Today we have nearly 1,000 banks, and what the pendulum has swung is that we do have incredibly smaller banks, unprofitable banks, unlike Zempler Bank, where the business model probably is not robust enough. And I do believe that you will see consolidation in this industry because 30 years ago, we had way too few banks. And now we probably have too many banks not delivering value to customers, thus not delivering value to shareholders, and thus they do need to figure out what to do. I do think that there will be some consolidation in there, but we're glad to be able to control our own destiny because I think another important aspect of our business, although the likes of Monzo have reported profit, Starling has reported profit, but we were definitely the first digital bank to report profit, and we've been profitable for a number of years. So it's one of those things where people need to get to scale, and I think there is some challenges within the challenger bank environment where there are probably slightly too many banks now not offering the value services that I think they should be, and thus I think they will be consolidated under another brand at some point over the next 2 to 3 years.
Rich Wagner, you're a very busy man. You've got a very busy week next week. Thank you for your time. Thank you for joining the Money Carer podcast.
If you have a question you would like to raise for a future Money Carer podcast, or if you have any comments on anything you've heard today, then do please get in touch with us at info@moneycarer.org.uk. Thanks for listening.